Our next panel, we've got a terrific group of folks who are going to dig into the issues highlighted by Third Way's polling. They'll give us a view of what happened from on the ground in battleground states, and most importantly, talk more about where Democrats go from here. So if we could ask Lauren Harper Pope to come up. She's going to lead our discussion. She's a political and communications strategist, co-founder of the Welcome Party, which has already been mentioned today as a fantastic partner of New Deal and an important organization dedicated to building a big tent Democratic Party that wins. She's joined by Matt Yglesias, a Bloomberg columnist and author of the must-read newsletter Slow Boring on Substack. And we will hear from two New Deal leaders, Scranton Mayor Paige Cognetti and Atlanta State Representative Tanya Miller, who is the newly elected chair of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus. So welcome, everybody. And Lauren, I'll let you take it away.
Good morning, y'all. Great to see this beautiful room of people. Thanks, Lene, for a great presentation. We love Lene and Third Way. All right, guys, let's get into it. I feel like this is the buzzy topic session, so let's have some fun today. My first question is more of a joke than a question, but as two swing state residents, how happy are you not to see ads anymore?
The key was the Hallmark Channel. There were no political ads on Hallmark. So if you find yourself in a swing state in another election year, Hallmark is the way to go.
Duly noted. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to start with my friend Matt. Slow Boring, great publication. Y'all should subscribe and paid subscribe. So after the election, you wrote, an honest assessment of why Democrats lost has to acknowledge that 90% of the explanation is an inflation-driven anti-incumbent trend that has hit essentially every rich country around the world. You want to talk any more about that and what that could mean for Democrats' response to problems over the next 2 to 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, sort of trying to make 2 points there. But one is, you saw incumbent parties losing all throughout the past 2-3 years. There was global inflation. It was a huge headwind for everybody, everywhere. And so on some level, I think that's good news, quote unquote, right? I mean, everybody was hit with these things, right-wing parties where they were incumbents, et cetera. But it does also mean that going forward, you just still have to think about what are we doing? What were the structures inside the Democratic Party that made it difficult for the Biden-Harris administration and the Harris campaign to address that question effectively, because you're not going to have the exact same set of issues and problems recurring in the future, but we need to ask, what are the internal dynamics that made it challenging? I think Lene's polling basically highlighted it, which is that you have a country where conservatives outnumber liberals by a very large amount. And so to win, you need to express to people the view that you significantly differ with liberals, right? Like in meaningful ways. But that means that you risk backlash from liberals. The last time that I was on this stage, I was interrupted by climate defiance protesters who seized the stage. They were outraged that I had written a column expressing the view that Vice President Harris's stance on fracking was correct. But what I said in the piece was that, it's not good enough, right? If you want to position yourself as somebody who understands the role of natural gas and fossil fuels in the American economy, you can't just say, okay, I agree with it, right? You have to articulate a perspective that you disagree with the most extreme members of the environmental movement, that you have a different opinion on these topics, but then the risk is that people will scream at you. When you're constantly optimizing to not get yelled at by left-wing people, you're not conveying to moderates that you disagree with left-wing people, and so you get all those results that Lene just put up here. There's a lot of nuance in specific questions, but like that chart, right? Conservatives outnumber liberals by 2 to 1. You need to make people think that you are not one of them, and that means being brave enough to get yelled at. I think just structures absolutely every topic.
I was there when Climate Defiance came to come at Matt, so can confirm that that's a true story. And literally, yeah. And just doubling up on the bravery piece, because I think that is going to be really imperative for the next few years. Going into a question for the group here, I guess just what were your biggest takeaways from this election? And try not to be down in the pits, because we're a silver lining group, right?
I'll go. I think, well, first of all, we're all still in a little bit of shock, and certainly for Black women, a little bit of mourning at what we witnessed. This thing that our mothers always told us: you have to be 3 times as good. All the things just to be considered and to stand and watch a woman who was probably the most qualified presidential candidate that I have seen in my lifetime take the loss that she did is personally something that we are grappling with. But I think at the end of the day, the message, the takeaway is that we have failed to own the ground, and we have failed to own the message. And that's essentially what we just heard in the polling. We have to become the party of working families. It's difficult to have a big tent party and to get coalescence around a wide variety of important issues for our constituency. But at the end of the day, we have to focus on the things that bind us, the things that hold us together. And I love to hear smart people talk. That's why I love coming to New Deal conferences. But the people don't want to hear this shit. Like, they want to hear... they really don't. Like, they don't want to hear all this. They don't want to hear us wonk out anymore. They don't want to hear us talk down to them about policy and fracking. And, they want to understand, what are you going to do to make my life better? Do you see me? Am I centered in where you are? Are you talking to me, and are you listening to me? And there is no party better suited to do that than us. And I think we have just got to be better at saying it plain, and making it simple for folk, and reconstructing the brand of Democrat as the party of the American working class. And I think if we do that work, we'll be more successful. That's my takeaway.
Well, I want to push back just a second on that, because I think both of y'all are right in some ways. But the problem, I think, is that people don't want to hear, like Lene was mentioning, that this wasn't an election about racism and sexism necessarily. It was about centrist policy. Harris was a progressive 4 years ago. So for her to just all of a sudden be a centrist was not authentic or reliable for voters. So while they do want authenticity, they also want the policy that Matt was talking about. Like, that's where voters are. So I just want to make that statement.
Well, just to say what my point is. So I'm speaking from Georgia, so let me just center myself there. The Black vote was down in Georgia. There was a disconnection with the Black voter when we had a Black female president candidate on the ballot. And the reason for that, I think, is far more simple. And I think when we talk about who the voter is, there are voters like you and me, and then there are voters that are not. But they are voters. And just for example, I'll give you, my mom has been a true blue Democratic, but she never misses an election. She will never miss an election until the day she is no more. Half of the stuff that Democrats are talking about, it's not even on her. It's the price of bread for her, literally. So what I'm saying to you is that we cannot continue to take the centering of working people for granted, and we have got to message and talk to them, not stop talking about these important issues, but know what the message is and who the messenger is for the diversity of our electorate.
So Saturday after the election, I was at the Ukrainian Vets Club in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And in that room are a lot of veterans, a lot of just neighborhood folks. And 2 individuals, these were separate conversations. Hey, Mayor, saw you yesterday on the news. What were you talking about? they didn't hear what I was talking about. It happened to be a no tax increase budget for 2025. Oh, that's so great. They didn't care what I was saying. They didn't listen, even then when it was good news. They just saw me, and knock wood, seemed to, after 5 years in office, have a generally positive opinion about me. And we think about Donald Trump and how he's been doing just that since the 80s. It is image. And so I love these conversations, Matt. When I hear your voice, I hear me in the car listening to The Weeds for years and years. So I'm just going to close my eyes every time you talk. So it's great to meet you. But we have to keep having these conversations. I have these types of conversations in Scranton. We're doing the policies, we're doing the stuff, but we don't talk much about that. We're really trying to get out what we're doing in images, right? We're putting up street signs. I'm cleaning up garbage. A couple of weeks before the election, it wasn't a set cleanup. I was just moving some cardboard away from an underpass underneath a railway in my neighborhood, and a guy in a bright red truck full of Trump signs. The whole bed was full of Trump signs. And he pulls up and he says, "Mayor, is that you? Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." He's like, "You're doing a great job. You're doing a great job. You keep it up." So everyone in this room, we all know that at the local level, we do know our constituents. They know us. There is cross appeal. I don't know if he votes for me, but some of them do. I know they do. But a lot of that is the image. When they see us picking up the garbage, they don't care what I'm doing on housing policy. They really don't care. I mean, they don't want it in their neighborhood. Let's not kid ourselves. But we're not talking about these granular things. We're not talking, and it's devastating. We're not talking about climate change. We're talking about stormwater and how we're not flooding your basement. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that we're not flooding your basement. Now, the policy of that doesn't make sense because the money for that comes with Democratic administrations. It comes with the investment from the Biden-Harris administration and the rescue plan and the infrastructure bill. And I have been talking about that, and clearly it wasn't enough. But I think we have to really sit back and understand the reality that so much of this is image, and so much of it is what we're putting up, and people aren't listening to the words we're saying unless it's something that they really disagree with and is going to trigger them.
So, you guys are good politicians, and part of good politics, right, is you talk to people, you communicate with them. I mean, just like you guys were saying, right? And you seem agreeable, and that's great. And I'm being a jerk, and I know that, and I'm self-aware about that. But what I'm trying to say here, right, because I think if people need to take something away in their hearts, not necessarily say to the world, but take something away in their hearts, right, from this election, it's like, yes, image matters, identity matters, racism, sexism, structure, American public opinion, et cetera, et cetera. But a weakness for Donald Trump was that there was a concern that Republicans would ban abortion. Democrats knew that was his weakness, and they said that a lot about him. Trump knew that was a weakness. So what he did was he said, no, that isn't true. No, I won't do that. And journalists gave him a hard time about it. They said, well, what if a national abortion ban passes? Will you sign it? He said, no, I will not sign it. I will veto it. There are pro-life people, a lot of pro-life people in the Republican Party. They have very strong feelings about this issue. They believe this is the legalized murder of innocent babies. He told them, no, in public, no, I will not do what you want, because he knew the voters wanted to hear that he agreed with moderate voters about this, not with his base. I think the Harris campaign made a lot of smart decisions under difficult circumstances, but I did not see them ever once make a decision as bold and decisive on a critical subject of electoral weakness, something where they were excruciatingly clear, drawing a really hard line. There are people in my coalition who have strong feelings on this topic, but I disagree with them. I agree with you, the median voter, right? Part of the genius of local office is that you get to focus on more practical stuff, and that's incredible. But like in big picture national politics, we're talking what is the brand of the Democratic Party? The brand is that it's a liberal party in a country that doesn't have that many liberal people. You need to be able to take some big, tough swings like Trump did on the abortion issue, like 8 years ago he did on the Medicare and Social Security issue, right? He said, here's a part of the conservative agenda that people don't agree with, and I am going to ditch it. I'm going to take the darts. I'm going to be contentious. I'm going to draw a hard line. Now, I think he's probably lying about this stuff. I think bad things are going to happen and there's going to be backlash, and that's going to be an opportunity for Democrats. But the point is, he tried to convince people that he wasn't lying, that he had really broken with his base. And for all the good things that the Biden-Harris administration did, that the Harris campaign did, I don't think they ever drew that kind of line.
But in defense of local, I don't see why those local stories and images can't be in the national political sphere.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, where I was desperate to have Kamala Harris in a construction vest going around all the bridge work, or sitting in traffic as a joke, like, man, traffic is so bad because there's so many bridges being rebuilt. Like, they're funding that, they're helping with that. Donald Trump was giving $100 bills out at the grocery store. It's probably illegal, but people liked it.
For sure.
Yeah, you heard it here, y'all. Say no to the groups, and realize that you're in a room full of people who are going to have your back, right? All right, Mayor Paige. You live in the great state of Pennsylvania. Do you want to tell us more about your thoughts on Pennsylvania's turnout and electorate decision-making, electing Trump, and even down ballot, maybe victories that you saw?
Yeah, we had mixed results. We were able to keep the Pennsylvania House. Malcolm Kenyatta, the state representative, is right in the back. Hello, my friend. Pennsylvania House Democrats maintained their one vote majority that they have had. So we still, and Joanna McClinton, I don't see her in the room today, but she is a New Deal leader. She is the Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania. And them keeping that body was from the hard work of Joanna, all of the representatives, and a ton of volunteers across Pennsylvania. And I know there's a lot of states where the state level politics, they were able to preserve a blue House, a blue Senate, but the state went for Trump. And it was really interesting to watch. We had one of those districts right next to Scranton where Jim won. He won his seat, but it went Trump by a lot. And a lot of that is because it's local and you can know your folks. And I think a lot of it is racism and sexism, to be honest, in some of these places. But our brand is off. In Philadelphia, 100,000 fewer voters in Philadelphia this year than in 2020, and that's tough to sift through that. We had an incredible ground game. I mean, something like 10 days out, 2 million doors knocked in one weekend. I mean, it was all the Obama alumni came back. They left their families for a couple months. They came back to Philly. We had everybody out there. They just weren't really buying what we were selling, and the fact that they didn't turn out was tough. There were also a lot of folks that came in, punched the ticket for Trump, and left. And I think that's why you see Senator Casey still fighting, Dave McCormick. That recount is going on. I'm not sure that it's going to go our way, unfortunately, but those disparate results are really interesting. But we held fast at the local level. We did really well there. We lost a couple of congressional members. That was tough, and that's where I didn't think that in northeastern Pennsylvania we would lose Matt Cartwright. He's our congressman. That was the biggest surprise for me in the evening. Jim Haddock, same district, kept his House seat, but Matt Cartwright lost. So the nationalization of things is really tough, and those ads that were just everywhere all the time on issues that, as we know, we weren't talking about. No, Kamala Harris wasn't talking about they, them versus you. She wasn't talking about that, but they were very successful in driving home those simple things that stuck in your head, and that was tough, and we got to combat that. And as we've been always saying for decades and decades, we've got to simplify our message. We've got to figure out how to get through to people in ways they remember.
Absolutely. Representative Miller, kind of same with Georgia. Obviously Georgia's a swing state, and there have been some trends there. Maybe you want to talk about the statewide results and what indicators in Georgia you think would be, indicators for other places across the country that we should maybe be paying more attention to.
Yeah, so for Georgia, it was interesting. We actually, I think nationwide, voter turnout was down. In Georgia, voter turnout was up. But the demographics of the up turnout, I think presented a challenge for us. The black vote was down. We were down 2 percentage points. The white vote was up 2 percentage points, and I think it made the world of a difference. I think what is going on, and some of this is definitely going to be regional, but I think the disconnect between the party and the people is most evident in Georgia for me, because the base did not turn out for the first black woman president on the ballot. And so, and what we were finding on doors was that people just didn't see a difference. They just didn't understand how their lives hadn't got better for the last 4 years, and they just didn't understand, well, what is she going to do for me? They just did not see themselves reflected really in either candidate, and so they just stayed home, right? So we had a lot of trending red in places that had trended a little blue in 2020. We had some areas that are trending a little bit more blue, but at the end of the day, there's just a lot of work to do. We are the minority party in Georgia. We started out with 78 seats. We netted 2 seats, so we are up to 80 in a 180-member House of Representatives. So, I think we were forecasted to be, based on demographics and the redraw and a court decision and all the fights we have all the time about voting in Georgia, somewhere between 83 and 85. So while we didn't net, there is a lot of disappointment in terms of how far we are away from the majority. So the important takeaway for me in Georgia is this. We have got to engage with our base a whole lot. And we have got to take winning these local seats more seriously. We have got to activate our electorate, not every 4 years, but every 2 years in a serious way, which requires us to focus on things like fundraising and messaging. And so I think that's sort of our takeaway. Our party is having somewhat of a reckoning right now. I don't know if you're reading about that, but certainly 2026 will be a battle for us, and we are working very hard to try to get the infrastructure in place so that we can keep our senior senator and make some gains in the House, for sure.
So another question for the group. What did we learn in y'all's experiences and even nationally, Matt, at some of the trends about young voters, independent voters, Black and Hispanic voters? What were your biggest takeaways? I don't know how many people here were at Welcome Fest, but Millen gave a presentation on young voters and just essentially that they're independent voters, right? And they're not nearly as liberal as people claim them to be. And I think that obviously perhaps had an effect on this election cycle. So just curious of y'all's thoughts on some of the more niche demographic results for this year.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we see is that when I was young voters were way, way, way more liberal than middle-aged people. Now that I'm middle-aged, my cohort is still the most liberal cohort in America. But the idea that this was a relentless historical tide is not true. The people who are 15 years younger than me are more moderate than the people roughly my age. And that's, just the nature of life, right? Black and Hispanic voters, obviously very important to the Democratic Party, very important to the future of the country. And I think that's something, what you said about engaging with the base, Black turnout and Black switch in votes, choice, preference to Republicans, very, very important phenomena. And I think we need to take this very seriously. When I'm not working, I'm a parent. My son attends a school that's about 10 blocks from here. It's 50% Black, 25% Latino, 25% white. Whenever the parents at the school, we disagree about all kinds of stuff, school board shit, you know how it is. It's in Logan Circle. It's in the kind of gay neighborhood of Washington, D.C. So we have a lot of LGBT parents. We have a lot of issues about LGBT issues that come up. The people who are most conservative on those topics tend to be the Black parents, often, church-going religious traditionalists. And you see when you just talk about things, the people who tend to have more traditionalist ideas about gender roles, again, tend to be the African-American and Latino parents compared to the affluent white parents. What would be convenient for Democrats is if you can just kind of staple progressive stances on each issue together and get everyone to agree. So you say, well, we're going to be progressive on racial issues and all the Black people will vote for us. We'll be progressive on immigration issues and all the Latinos will vote for us. We'll be progressive on LGBT issues, all the gay people will vote for us. That's great if it works, but in reality, you get tensions. You can drive voters away. One thing people do when they're cross-pressured is they stay home. They say, neither party is really representing me. You talk to Democratic Party donors, they're very fired up about climate change. You talk to working class Democrats or ex-Democrats, they're very concerned about the cost of living, right? And so you have to listen to the base, but like with your ears and your mind open and actually hear what they're saying, right? And take that into account, because you can fall into kind of wishful thinking that it's like all kinds of people have progressive views on some issues. And if you cherry pick, you can say, well, we can just make everybody happy. But, you can't. Most people have conservative views on some issues. You can't be canceling people. You can't be deliberately narrowing the tent, right? You've got to be engaged and listening critically to what it is they're saying.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I'll be quick. No, I agree with that, and I think that when I talk about, or as we are talking about, not I, we are talking about, like, how do we message to this broad, big tent constituency in a way that is unifying? I think the simplicity, we have to hone in on those issues that everybody gets, everybody feels, everybody understands. It's fine to have a brand of being inclusive, but I don't think that we can necessarily if we're too loud on one issue, then folks think we're not seeing their issue. So for me, it's always a difference between policy and message. And so our policies are the best. We have the best policies. We just do, in my opinion. We're going to really work to get it right for everybody. But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to message every single policy. So we have to just be really surgical in the message that we are sending out to folks in order to try to get as many folks as possible in our constituency to coalesce around it. I think it's possible.
When I think of young voters and registering voters in Pennsylvania, we have closed primaries. So it's not policy or anything. Before, just out the gate, we are disenfranchising anyone registering to vote who doesn't want to pick a party. So there's things like that. There's structural reforms I think we need to make in places like Pennsylvania, so that when I'm trying to register an 18-year-old and I have to tell them about this closed primary thing, I feel like I'm already defeated, right? Because they're like, well, I'm going to register as an independent. And they should, that's good. But then they're disenfranchised from half of the election. So we have some of those pieces where we got some work to do.
I'm going to quote Matt again. So he was saying, and this is good for this room, New Deal leaders. This is a time for new blood and new leadership and a new round of frank argumentation. Do we want a big tent that can compete across the country and contribute meaningfully to better governance everywhere? Do we want a party that delivers economic policies that generate prosperity and wins votes by reflecting voters' actual moral and cultural values, or a party that insists on trying to impose fringe values on an unwilling populace while flailing to buy votes with unsound fiscal policies? So you also have, like, between that, it's good, right? That was good. Yeah, we like Matt's writing, right? You have written on that, and you've also written on, like, a common sense manifesto. So, like, I guess just combining all those things, what are some of your prescriptions for the Democratic Party moving forward, and even just for the leaders here in this room who are obviously wanting to be good governance in their cities and towns and places?
You know what Representative Ryan said earlier really resonated with me, because what I took his message to be is that on some level, he thinks and I think that, all of you in the room, I think almost everyone working in practical Democratic Party politics sort of knows what you need to say to connect more with voters, but there's an incredible amount of fear. I think so many elected officials who I talk to want to, talk to me off the record and say, Matt, I like your newsletters, and how come but they want somebody else to come along and take the risk of taking some brickbats from the left, because that will kind of clear the way for them, right? They're going to be like the icebreaker, and then some little ship will go in the channel. But what the congressman said is correct. There's nobody who can change the image of the Democratic Party other than the people in this room. You are the Democratic Party, and you can duck and cover and emphasize local issues as best you can and evade the national brand, or you can, each of you as individuals and as a collective, can speak out, and we can tolerate each other. We can be inclusive in a true sense of each other if people have heterodoxies. But you get a room, 100's kind of normal Democrats, right? Progressive on some issues, moderate on some others. But then you try to say, well, I'm only going to let you articulate your moderate views if you can achieve absolute consensus among this 100 people. And you're never going to articulate those views. So the collective voice will sound dramatically more extreme than any of the individuals in the room. And that's what happens if people are afraid. If they're afraid of getting stabbed in the back by their colleagues and their fellow Democrats and progressive organizations. And you all need to be braver. You all need to be more supportive of each other. People in my line of work need to be supportive. But there's nobody else. This is what we have. You guys have to do it.
Amen. Last question, and I think we're going to go into the group, so prepare your questions, friends. Again, I'm a big fan of silver linings and, the good vibes, right? So I guess what were the silver linings that y'all saw from this election cycle? What are the things that you're like, you know what? We can look forward and we can learn from our mistakes and things like that.
I think in this room, we are so fortunate because we're in it, right? I know we have lots of friends, volunteers that are like, what should I do? What should I do? We got to get up the next day and go cut a ribbon, go write some legislation, go keep doing the work. So we're all, we all worked very hard to be in these positions. We're very fortunate in this moment that we have each other, we can keep going. So I've been working to spread that locally, that, we've got the networks now with national local leaders, with mayors in Pennsylvania. We have the network to navigate these things, and we're going to do this together. So keeping our communities together is really important and trying to lift folks up. And I do think there's an opportunity here because Trump is so extreme, because he is really just a caricature, a Disney villain. People voted for him and not us in a way that is enabling us to have very serious and very candid conversations, and I hope open us up to really remake the brand of the Democratic Party. So I see that as an opportunity.
You stole my line, that last part. You were doing good, then you got the last part. I think to echo what the mayor just said, I think there is an opportunity for us in this really dark time to get in the lab together, to really get in the lab, before you get in the booth, as the rappers say. But, we need to figure out, rework, rebrand, recreate, re-energize our party in a way that this loss will force us to do. And so I think that viewing this, coming out of sort of the haze of disappointment and viewing this as really an era of opportunity, an era of soul searching for us, is the silver lining for me.
I think the best silver lining is that if you look at the battleground states, right, Harris did meaningfully better in those states. You can look at media market effects, et cetera. The literal campaign, right, the ads that were aired was quite good. And those ads, they focused on healthcare, they focused on tax fairness, they focused on abortion rights. Those are things that I think if you ask most Democrats, they would say are very core to them and their identity and to the party, which means that there is a message there that people like and that is similar to the existing main message of the Democratic Party, but it is pulled down by a lot of cruft, which is bad and needs to be sloughed off. But the basic winning themes in the ad campaign are really solid, normal Democratic Party stuff that does not require some wild reinvention. And we had down ballot candidates, people in this room, people like Ruben Gallego, lots of people winning based on those messages because they were not dragged down by some of the specific excesses of 2019, 2020. So I think that with a little bit of common sense and a little bit of boldness, there's really good material, quite close to the core of where Democrats are.
Yeah, I want to close on something. My co-founder, Liam, and I wrote a piece for Democracy Journal this year and said, we must encourage candidates and elected officials to be party makers, someone who creates an independent brand by taking positions that work for their district and advance a pragmatic faction, not only their party, and not party takers, someone who embraces the agenda of ideological groups and then must explain those positions to their voters. So we're party makers in here, right? Yeah. Because we like parties, right? I'm just kidding. All right, questions. Let's do it. No preguntas?
Everyone agrees with everything.
Dang. Y'all did great.
So we're all on the same page here, guys. All right, okay, fine.
Amazing.
Hi, I'm Nicole Clowney. I'm from Arkansas. And so this may be a little more cynical than I intended, but it's where I am at right now. We have 19 members, Democratic members of our 100-member House of Representatives, and that's our first gain in 20 years. So that's where we're at. So I've seen a lot of what Republicans have done to gain the power that they have. Republicans in Arkansas were really late to take control of the state relative to the rest of the country. They did that by being sort of all of the things that are the opposite of what we're talking about today, which I love and agree with everything that I've heard. The Arkansas Republicans do not allow one member to step out of line, right? They are not, the Arkansas Republicans have gotten more and more extreme so that what used to be normal positions are now seen as extreme left positions in our state. I think we really have to contend with the fact that for a while, they did in fact let the far right of that party dominate and make those decisions. And now I think we are at a place in our country, as we saw with the dots, where the window has just moved so far right. I guess just, do y'all have thoughts on that? And how do Democrats learn the not dark lessons from that? I will say I think Black women show us better than any other group in our state for sure how to kind of get together when it's time and all be on the same page. But just what lessons can we learn from that, and what lessons shouldn't we learn from that? I guess.
Well, look, Arkansas is a very conservative state. I mean, I think it's and Arkansas had this Democratic legislative majority that was a lag of some very, very old dynamics. And so I think that in those contexts, right, we saw in the poll, 40% of Americans self-identify as conservative. Arkansas is more conservative than the average state. So they've got a majority of self-identified conservatives being very dogmatic, being very doctrinaire, polarizing everything. That works for Arkansas Republicans, and it works for Democrats in California. But I think it's not exactly like a lesson you want to learn so much as a limiting case. You know what I mean? Like that's not how Trump won nationally. Trump won nationally by acting heterodox, by reassuring people about abortion, by saying Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are Democrats and he's got a big tent. And so but he did, so it's a different problem set, I think.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. I'm State Representative Dontavius Jarrows out the great state of Ohio. I have to be honest with you all. I have one of my colleagues over there, see Zach Klein over there. I went to barbershops all across the state as the assistant minority leader to campaign and to engage folks across a wide range of cultural perspectives. I've talked to my family members about this election, and after the election, we had really honest conversations with them. And some of my folks, some who were close to me actually, I since cut them off, have said that they voted for Trump. And I was like, but I sent you all the information. I gave you everything you needed to know to vote right. And they were like, well, did you go on TikTok? Did you know that Kamala wasn't black? And did you trace the lineage? Did you talk to this person, like Candace and Owens? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And it speaks to an infrastructure issue on the Democratic Party side, where I believe this misinformation campaign has really penetrated I don't want to say low literacy, but just folks who just are getting that information on a day-to-day basis. So I would love to get your perspective on kind of the misinformation, the advancements of misinformation, how it's really infiltrating the attitudes and perceptions of voters, and how do we combat that when we have maybe more of an archaic system of messaging that may not be doing the same thing to penetrate to those same voters.
Yeah, I mean, there's a steep hill to climb on that, and obviously the other side tends to lie a lot, and that's just not who we are. But back to the simplicity, we're on TikTok, we can go on Twitch, we can go on Minecraft, we can do all these things, but we have to do it with a simple message, and we have to do it with images that are going to work. We can't, try to talk about our housing policy for 60 seconds. No, right? So I think that simplicity piece is really important.
Same. I think that we obviously can't start meeting misinformation with misinformation. That's not who we are. But I do think that the answer to it, the antidote to it, is to have a message that is simple and that resonates. And it's really just that simple. I really think that a lot of our issue is just with how we message. I think it's just as pragmatic as that, in my opinion.
I also think even some of the reversals we had in urban areas this year was interesting, of like, New York City and other big cities voting more for Trump because they're seeing Democratic governance as not good. Like, that's a big problem that we need to address. And Matt and I were at the Abundance Conference when he got, harassed, which was talking about better government efficiency and cutting red tape and making sure that government actually performs and works well for people. So I think that there are some solutions that are bubbling up. So we can work on some stuff soon.
Hi, Andrea McClellan, Norfolk City Council. Our turnout was really low, I'm embarrassed to say. We had 56% turnout. We are a Democratic city. People weren't excited. I guess my question or takeaway would be, and also, by the way, yes, Virginia, we have an election next year for governor or lieutenant governor, attorney general. We didn't see resources from the Harris campaign on the ground in Virginia because everything went to our friends in the swing states. And that disenfranchises a lot of folks, number one. So how do we continue to have that pragmatic message consistently and not just when it's time for an election, not just when folks decide to show up and go to a black church at the last minute, right? We've got to be doing this year round in every year in every state. And how do we do that?
Yeah, my mom lives with us, and we're extraordinarily lucky. We're from Oregon, so she still votes in Oregon. She would not register in Pennsylvania, and I told her if we lost by one vote that it was all on her. But she was so mad that there was so much money in Pennsylvania and nothing in Oregon. So I understand that. I think that's where this, again, we've lost to the Disney villain, and so the county party conversations, the state party conversations are finally opened up, right? One of the chairs and leaders of the Harris campaign in Philadelphia came out swinging at the Philadelphia chair, and it's broken open a conversation that needed to happen. So I'm hopeful that this opens up county party conversations, state party conversations, so that we're doing that their offices are open across our states all year round, because I agree we're going to lose ground, because Virginia will be a swing state again, right?
My silver lining was that the sort of super PAC and campaign ads that Harris did were really, really good. Those ads, of course, they're focused in the swing states. Ground game, you're right, there should be investment. 50 states. But TV ads, of course, you run them in the swing states. But some of the weakness you see is that Democrats were not carrying forward in their earned media, whether that's TikTok or whether it's Meet the Press, the same kind of message that they put in the ads. And you see that to people in Norfolk who are not being bombarded with future forward ads. The campaign isn't about healthcare, tax fairness, abortion rights, right? And, some of that is the limitations of the campaign, the 100-day campaign. Some of it is the limitations of the candidate, her seeming discomfort in sort of unscripted settings. Some of it is structural weakness of Democrats on social media. But you got to look at the messages that work and then say, how can we deliver those messages all the time? Everywhere, and not just in our most scripted, most targeted kinds of settings, because you never know. I mean, the weakness in the election results in Virginia this year was surprising. That was closer than they thought it was going to be, because they weren't, it wasn't decisive, so that's a fine targeting decision, but you want to be talking to people throughout the country with your good messages, not like saving it for your ads.
Yeah.
I'm Bruce Rubin. I'm an advisor for New Deal and ran a bunch of companies before I got into politics, so it's a good thing. And write some checks for all of you, so that's also a good thing. So we spent $1.5 billion or more on this election. Where I live is ground zero of the election. All 4 candidates showed up in my county 2 weeks before the election, which is in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. My borough is actually the most liberal borough this side of Berkeley. And yet I had 6 people knock on my door election day, which was a waste of time, frankly. And $1.5 billion got blown away really ineffectively. I don't agree with you, by the way, on the ads. I thought they were terrible. And from a business standpoint, when I look at the party, it needs a major overhaul, not an incremental approach. And what I hear is incremental approaches where you need basically structural approaches, both at the local, state, and federal level. And it also needs a new face across the board, because the party's viewed as old. Its leadership is old at the top. The party's viewed as old. Its infrastructure in Philadelphia, because I know the congressman involved in Philadelphia, is old. And how do you feel about that? Because I'm here because I care. I'm here because I think it needs to change. But I do believe incremental change is not enough.
No, I agree with that. I mean, I think that, look, I was watching a Simon Sinek video, just sort of talking about this idea of branding, and thinking about sort of some of the problems, structural problems I think we have as a party. I think that, it would be great if we could figure out a way to brand the party starting from the why, right? This is the sort of Apple model of how Apple is so successful, even though its products are possibly not as great as the other competition. It is really, it's finding a way to create a brand, and this could be a whole seminar, a whole panel, a whole conference in and of itself, the rebrand of the Democratic Party. But, we have to find that thing that unites the folks under this big tent, and they have to feel it in their heart. It's not something that they have to think about. They have to already feel it and then be predisposed or inclined to follow us where we go, right? And so that requires us to figure out who we are. What do we stand for as Democrats? What is this party about? Is this the party of each one of our constituencies? Is it the party of the loudest constituency, or is it something more basic, something more true, something that doesn't require people to do a whole lot of thinking? We got to tap into that lizard instinct in people and make people think that their survival, their growth, their prosperity it lies within the Democratic Party, and that is going to take work. I don't think that's something that any of us could snap our finger and have the answer to. Otherwise, we'd have the answer to it, right? But I think recognizing that that's a problem where we are right now is a really important first step. So in messaging, you want to be messaging consistent with your brand. I do think we have to be really clear about who we are as Democrats and then message that.
Well, and we have to be real about what things are. So I was on the platform committee for the DNC. I thought that would entail being a part of conversations. There was no conversation. There was a PDF and a Zoom the next day and an up-down vote. And it was very disappointing to me. And this is the first time I've said this out loud. But I just, what is that? You have assembled, we have like 6 mayors on it. There were legislators. There were all these people that have been involved in successfully in local and county and state politics for years. And there was nothing except for just a quick Zoom, thank you very much. And it has to be real. The conversations have to be real at the state level, at the local level, especially at the national level. So I agree. We gotta be honest. It's not pointing fingers at anybody. It's not anybody's fault. One person. It's just we got to be real about this, because if we're not real, we're not authentic. People aren't going to find us authentic.
So, the point about the party being perceived as old is, I mean, obviously the president is quite old. That's not a misperception that people have. You need candidates who can speak in their own voice, right? I mean, to some extent, right? More money, you can air more ads. That's great. But you can get into a kind of a million man month fallacy about developing the actual message, right? Like adding more and more people into the room to decide what you're going to say about the issues doesn't reach a conclusion. You need a candidate who decides for herself and then can discuss the issues in town halls and interviews and be the brand. And, there's a lot of reasons why that wasn't the case, but we're now sort of 3 cycles in a row of trotting out establishment figures rather than somebody like Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, who were seen as disruptors, who then like became leaders. And, you know, I think the more successful candidates are like that. They kind of came in from somewhere, they were fresh, you know, they just seemed more new and interesting than kind of throwbacks to the politics of the 90s.
Good morning. My name is Marcelia Nicholson. I chair the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. In Wisconsin, we have 72 counties. Around 5 of those are consistently blue, and those are more diverse counties. As a county leader, I've had the pleasure of traveling around the state. And more than once, I've been told, you're the first black woman I've ever met. You don't seem so bad. And I know we've heard that folks have questioned Kamala's blackness, but they also questioned Obama's blackness, and he overperformed in Wisconsin. I wonder what you think about that, and what do we do to prepare our base? Because this includes other people of color. At the end of the day, Trump is a known quantity, and Kamala Harris was not as a black woman. So how can we prepare our base for both a woman president and a first black woman president?
I think part of the problem was that Barack Obama was a conservative Democrat, and Harris was perceived as not a centrist Democrat.
I mean, you know, Obama spent a lot of time in rural Iowa and rural Wisconsin challenging people's preconceptions about what a black politician would be like. And Harris didn't really do that. You know, I mean, I think everybody in politics, right, faces certain kinds of stereotypes that people are going to have about them. And that can be a problem. And then the question is like, what do you do to try to address the problem? If all you know about someone is this a black woman, you're going to think she's probably a lot more liberal than the average American, which is true, you know, as a population average. But then you can try to engage with people and address that, or you can decide not to. And if you're trying to make a career not in rural Wisconsin, but in San Francisco, then being seen as very left-wing is probably good for you. She had a very successful career. It's hard to become vice president of the United States, but that whole career never involved winning over swing voters until suddenly she was the candidate for president of the United States. That's not great preparation, right? Whether it's Tammy Baldwin or Raphael Warnock or Ruben Gallego, you have all kinds of people who win in tough races, but that wasn't her background.
I think there's sort of, if you just look at this question and you're looking at Barack Obama and you're looking at Kamala Harris, I think there are 2 conversations, right? I think there is the question of how Barack was able to, I'll just generically say, appeal to white voters and insert moderates to conservatives to, you know, conservative, independent leaning, and then Kamala's ability to do that for the reasons my colleague just described. But then I also think you need to look at how Barack was able to connect with black voters. Which is for a different reason. And that has, I think, a little bit to do with just talent and personality and emotional IQ or EQ. So some of this is perhaps a little bit the stuff of political scientists, right? And some of this is just about talent and ability in the arena of the campaign. And I think it's not for nothing that she had such a short runway, right? She had so much of a long career behind her. She had the weight of the primary behind her and how she had to bend to the left, and not really enough time to course correct and sort of sell her ability to speak to really either of those sort of issues.
Thanks. Erin Mendenhall, I'm Salt Lake City Mayor. This has been a really great discussion. Tanya, I want to go to that conference. You should just make it happen, where we sit down and redefine
Debbie, make
ourselves.
it happen. Me and you, let's do this.
I think part of Part of the difficulty, I was the 8th one in my race in 2019 for mayor. I was the last one in. And I ran because I was sick of hearing the other 7 candidates mostly talk about the problems, sometimes talk about their theory of how to solve them. And I thought, people need actual tactics, and I'm going to wonk out on you, public, and I'm going to tell you how we're going to get it done. And I think part of the difficulty in looking at those numbers on the poll this morning is actually maybe winning today really just looks like a lot of complaining about, to identify emotionally with the struggle that the majority of voting Americans are feeling, and they don't want to hear me wonk out. They don't want to hear the Democratic Party maybe wonk out on how we're going to solve it for everybody. So my question for you is, I love what you're saying. I think, Tanya, your silver lining is real. This is an opportunity for us to redefine. How do we do that when what we see coming down the pipeline of threats against our communities is so real that we have to stand up and speak to the injustices that are about to happen? How do we not play into continuing to pit ourselves as far left liberals who don't understand what most voters are wanting to see?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful about getting breathless over every single thing, right? Energy management and choosing our battles, because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what they're going to focus on first. They can't do everything and tear down every institution all at once. I think in our communities we need to be pointed and smart about what battles we pick, while we, most importantly, keep doing the work, right? This room is full of steady hands, full of workhorses making government work every day for people. That's going to be a lot of it, is just doing our jobs and doing it well, while simultaneously fighting back with the Trump pieces. But I think we can look back, and we'll all have to kind of look back into how we were during the Trump administration, because I think there's a lot of pushback of the Democrats are just going to complain about everything the sky is falling. There might be a couple things that they do that are okay, and we should think about acknowledging a couple things that go well to give ourselves credibility, because if we're just anti all the time, we're not going to be perceived as thinking or allowing that discourse, or allowing for them to take a win if they have it. Now, they'll never, do a win for us, and Trump's going to put his name on all the bridges that got done with the Biden money. But we've got to make sure that we're not the screaming liberals about every single thing that Trump administration does, in my view.
Yeah, I think, and we were actually, some colleagues and I were talking about this yesterday, about how the issue of the trans issue, right? How Democrats were sort of doing what we do and standing up against an attack, right? And then sort of that became, that was perceived as being the only thing we cared about, right? And so Republicans are very good at forcing us to stand up on issues that are not necessarily the issue of the day for the vast majority of folks. And so this is the management of sort of big coalition politics. And I think, part of the way we do that is how we frame the fight, right? So instead of all the things, insert the things that make us sound, uber liberal and out of touch with everyone, including my own mom, who will never vote for someone to be discriminated against ever, right? But she also doesn't get this. Right? So how do we message back to our home base? So Republicans are creating solutions for problems that do not exist. They are wasting time talking about an issue that is not an issue, that belongs to parents and doctors and families, when right now in Georgia, Black women are dying at the highest rate in the country when they're trying to have babies. That we have 300,000 kids in Georgia who aren't on health care. So interrupt it and then punch back. So it's kind of like a bob and move. And it's I think we do that when we're clear about what we want to say, right? And when we're not clear about what we want to say, then we get, it's like squirrel, So I think it's meeting these, knowing that that's their playbook, that they have used it consistently, and being prepared with a message box that gets us back on track, right? And then we continue to hammer home our message about who we are and why we're the party that works for them, and point out why they're not. That's all I got right now. I'm sure we can come up with more together.
I think, you got to welcome people into the tent, right? I mean, this is welcome party, but when they start doing stuff, people are going to be alienated by some of the stuff they do, right? If they lay off half the federal workforce, national parks are going to be degraded. Some people who love nature are going to say, wait, what's happening here? And if they show up, you can't then tell them, okay, here's a 70-point plan, right? Like, you need to now agree that we need to end the oil and gas industry, or we don't want you in here. You got to say, like, you can defend our position on trans issues, but you can't force everybody to agree with it and say, you're going to be canceled, you're going to be thrown out if you have a traditional religious opinion, right? In so much of that, if you think about like the Women's March 8 years ago, so many people were appalled by Trump and wanted to show up and express that basic idea. This man is appalling. And what a lot of them received as they joined the resistance was a lecture, a laundry list, more and more things that you had to sign on for to be considered an acceptable member of the resistance. And over time, he kept getting more and more popular, right? Because the mechanisms of resistance were alienating. They were telling people, they were deliberately narrowing the tent, deliberately kicking people out. You need to lower the bar to participate and to say, if you think some of this stuff is bad, if you think this guy seems a little nutty, like, join us. That's what we're working toward. We're working for you, not telling you what you need to think to be on our team.
One last question, right?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Gerber-Wilson. I host the podcast Freedom Over Fascism, and I'm a historian. And I talk to a lot of people about message, and I think that in a lot of cases we have the right messages, but we are not heard. The media environment has changed so considerably that having the right message is a small part of it. So how do you guys see what needs to happen in order to create a media environment where we're actually heard? Because all the things that you said, actually, I think we had the right message in a lot of places, but it was completely overtaken by the right-wing echo chamber. So what do you think that we need to do in order to actually reach people with those messages?
I think one thing, and being here in DC where there are some funders and philanthropy is trying to figure out how they can move forward. We lost our local paper essentially last August. It got sold to Alden Capital, went from 160 years, family run in Scranton. I mean, a daily cartoon, like the whole I would not be in office if it weren't for the coverage of the corruption in Scranton and how I was fighting it. Now it is just a national paper and they wouldn't endorse anyone. So we need more local journalism and we need to be really pushing philanthropy to help with that. It's extremely important. And the timing of it, when they sold the paper August 28th of 2023, I thought, oh, this is so exactly perfect to see what's going to happen in November of 2024. It was awful. So that piece I think is really important. We need our local papers back in places like Scranton.
And I think that, some of this is that a lot of the folks that didn't show up to vote also don't listen to podcasts, right? And so the way I view messaging is, yes, you have to have the right message, but you also have to make sure that you're delivering it by land, by air, by sea, and that every single person in some respect as a part of this electorate has it. Everybody knows what Apple is. Everybody knows what Apple is, right? Kids, my nephew's 9 years old. He knows the difference between an iPhone and an Android, right? And he wants an iPhone. He doesn't know why, but he knows he wants an iPhone, right? So it's almost like, how do you make your brand and your message so ubiquitous that it is everywhere all the time? I don't know that it happens like that, right? This is the work of figuring it out, but it's certainly, what is the message? Who is the messenger, and how is it getting delivered? And I think all of those things can be wrapped up in we have to own the message, right? But I think your point is very well taken.
You guys know the Serenity Prayer, though, right? You need to,
yeah.
Right.
God grant me the serenity.
Yeah, so the strength to, accept the things I can't change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Yes. I always want to push back on this media stuff, because media is very important. If you happen to be a billionaire, yes, please, address the local news environment. But if you're an elected official, you need to address what you need to address, right? The media didn't make Kamala Harris say that she wants to spend taxpayer money on gender transition surgeries for criminals. Mm-hmm. She said that, right? The media didn't make Joe Biden try to shut down all oil and gas leasing on federally owned lands. They didn't make him, in an environment where people were upset about inflation and too much government spending, they didn't force him to do student loan forgiveness that the public wasn't asking for. These are the things that are under the control of politicians and elected officials. What do you say? What do you do? And back to Lene's charts, right? It is a country where conservatives outnumber liberals. If you want to win in a swing state, you need to convince people that you are meaningfully distinct from the left. And that means you have to do what you can do. It would be amazing if you had an all-consuming propaganda environment that lets you make everyone happy all the time, but you don't, and you gotta play on the field that's out there.
All right, friends. Closing thoughts. Anything you want to leave our group with?
It's on us, but I love that, and I love being in the fight with all of you. It's great to all be together in this moment.
Yeah, I think we're the good guys. I still believe that, certainly. And, we have to practice what we preach and really keep our party like the America we envision, one that is diverse, one that has capacity, broad capacity and tolerance, and one that keeps its heart close to what's best for the people.
Absolutely. You guys can do it. I really believe that. What people are like and what they want to hear, and just do it.
There you go. Thank you, guys.